Right, good afternoon everyone. It's 2 o'clock. I think we're probably good to start. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Sam. I'm the Customer Services and Clinical Director at Lynton, and we've got Kerry here with us as well today. And Kerry is the Clinic Director at Laser Skin Solutions in Bournemouth, and she's also been a clinical trainer on and off for Lynton over the years as well.
Hi everyone.
So yeah, today we're going to talk about consultations. So I think perhaps the most important part of any laser treatment that you do, and it's really important, I guess, that you do a good welcoming consultation. I think you could be the best practitioner in the world, you could be using the best equipment in the world, getting the greatest results, but if people do not feel at ease, they don't feel informed, if you haven't done a good professional consultation prior to that, then I don't see how your business could succeed. You know, I think it's a really, really critical part of any aesthetic treatment, really.
Yeah,
So,
I agree. I completely agree with that. I think it's the first, quite often it's the first point of contact. Depends how your business is set up, but it's like, how your receptionist is. If it's the first point of contact they're having with you, it kind of says a lot about the business. So yeah, I would agree
absolutely.
with that.
And for most clinics, all of the income that comes into the clinic starts with a consultation, pretty much. You know, you might sell some skincare and bits and pieces here and there, but I guess for most of the treatments that you do, that initial consultation is where the money comes in. So you have to get it right. We spend a lot of time and effort on doing things like clinical training and laser safety training, core knowledge, for example. Your insurance company will want to see that, but you know, they're not insisting on seeing that you've done good consultation training, and that your therapists and your all of the practitioners in your clinic have got good consultation skills. You know, so I would say most importantly, and you just mentioned it, Kerry, is just make people feel welcome, put them at ease, and build up a rapport with them. Would you agree?
Yeah.
How I mean, what you do these day in, day out. So what's your your typical kind of...
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love doing consultations. I think one of the nicest bits about our job is that we are seeing so many different people. You're not just sitting at a desk doing the same thing day in, day out. You are seeing different people. Everyone who comes through the door has different problems they want you to solve. So yeah, I do absolutely love doing consultations. And I think one of the, it's funny because I was saying to this to Sam the other day, wasn't I, that when I first started, I think, and obviously I know that we're probably speaking to a very different mix of people. Some people who are listening today have probably been doing it for years. Other people maybe just starting out. Other people maybe a year in. But I know when I first started, I was very much kind of, because I was so obsessed with getting, informed consent, which I know we're going to go on to later. I just felt like I had to give them almost like a laser lesson, because I had to get across this important information.
Talk
and
about
actually,
chromophores and anagen.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. They'd be like, sorry, what? So now, I mean, my consultations have probably actually changed hugely in terms of the terminology I use, how I tailor the consultation to people. But the thing that hasn't changed is how you make them feel when they walk through the door. And that's absolutely key. I mean, I'm someone, I hate being sold to. I can't stand it. And I think if you have the knowledge, the amazing equipment that can get the results, and the right intentions for your client, you actually don't have to do the hard sell. It's about making them feel welcome, instilling confidence in them that you are absolutely the person to do their treatment, and then basically solving their problems, because essentially everyone's coming to you with something that they want to fix. So yeah, so the main thing is also to listen when they first come in, is rather than do what I did in 2005 and like, right, laser. So, it's actually just to sit back, take a breath, give them something, maybe offer them a glass of water, so why have you come to see me today? And just kind of gently build that rapport right from the offset.
It's asking the open questions as well, isn't it? Not making any assumptions, like you say.
No.
The
So
things that you think
definitely
that
no
people might be
assumptions.
bothered about are not necessarily the things that they've come to see you for, obviously.
Yeah,
And then it's just
exactly.
listening, isn't it? And not, like you say, not doing the kind of, uh, you know, the sort of science lesson that people like me might have a tendency to do, you know. So yeah, listening and then summarising it back to them, I think, as well.
Yeah,
That can be
exactly. And that's a nice thing about the Lynton consultation form, because it brings it around full circle. So at the end, you do get to summarize. And even if you think, oh gosh, I forgot. And sometimes, you know, you can get engrossed in a conversation with a client. And even now I do it. And I suddenly think, oh, actually, I need to mention that. And so it's a good way of reminding yourself that, you know, you haven't forgotten anything. So
yeah.
listening is definitely key.
So it's then presenting that information, presenting the benefits of having a treatment with you, with your clinic, with your equipment, but also I think it can be a bit different for people who've been used to doing a very kind of, you know, in I guess a less of a, this is a medical consultation really that we're doing, and it's important that we present, as well as the benefits, that we present the risks or the alternative treatments as well, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and then it's I mean, you mentioned this the other day, it's tailoring it to your audience. So don't
Yeah.
just have the same spiel that you will just, you know, say for absolutely
No.
everyone.
And like I was saying to you the other day, I mean, you know, and unless they're a hairdresser, I don't use all of the anogen, you know, telogen, catagen phases. I sometimes say anogen, other times I'll just say the word actively growing, you know. So it's just tailoring it. But, you know, in my clinic, I do get so many different types of people who come in. And I think in a former webinar, I mentioned that once I had a physicist who came in, you know, and he was like, do you know the difference between laser and IPL? And I was like, yes, I do. You know, so, you know, and other people couldn't care less, you know, they're not interested, you know. So yeah, it's definitely about tailoring it to your audience.
Have you found over the years, Kerry, that people are more well informed these days, or has it not really changed, do you think?
They are, yes, they are, but they're also, so part of my role is often debunking myths that they think they know because they've read it on the internet. You know, it's written, therefore it is. And
Oh, the
or
Ender
they'll
Yag is
say,
the best laser for me.
yeah,
Well, actually,
exactly.
no. You
Yeah,
know, with your skin
exactly.
type, that's not going to be the case. So
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes they'll say, oh, my friend had this, so I only want that, or I had, and of course, as we all know, there are a lot of cheap IPLs out there. So some people say, I don't want IPL. So again, it's about just, you know, reassuring them that that's not the case. I mean, I did have one lady who came in and she absolutely insisted she wanted the laser and she was not suitable for that. So I literally did half a chin with the advanced handpiece, the IPL, half a chin with the YAG, and she could see instantly that the IPL was getting quicker results.
ask them to
So
decide. Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
fine, we can do it that way if you want.
So I think most of you, I guess, listening will probably be familiar with doing consultations, and you'll know the sorts of things that we do. But as I mentioned, it is a medical consultation, so we do have to make sure that we get a good medical history. You know, the number of absolute contraindications are few and far between, really, for laser treatments, apart from TANs, you know, active TANs generally. Conditions like melasma, pregnancy, but there aren't, you know, it's not a list as long as your arm really for this. But there are lots of things that we do need to be aware of. So medications as well, we'll talk about a little bit later on. Absolutely loads of photosensitizing medications out there, but actually very few that are complete contraindications to the treatments that we do. Identify if your client is suitable for treatment. Some people won't be. I mean, the amount of time that Lynton customers have said to me, I just knew that I shouldn't have treated her. I just, you know, I knew when she came in that I shouldn't. And so, you know, you have to sort of get a good feel for that person as well, and what they're after, and whether you can meet their expectations. Have they got realistic expectations or not?
And I would say always go with your gut. If for any reason you just get I just always listen to your gut. It's 99.9 times out of 10 it will always be right. you know.
Yeah.
So
We've got some treatment scenarios later on, and I've got some examples of situations where that's happened. Theory of treatment explained. I mean, I do actually think that it's useful to talk about the hair growth cycle, because it means that people, if you're having hair removal, not if you're having tattoo removal or skin rejuvenation, obviously, but it does mean that people have a better understanding about why they need to have a number of treatments, why you have to space those treatments at, you know, intervals of 1 to 2 months or whatever. So that can be useful. It helps them understand, for example, why those few little grey hairs on their chin are not going to respond if they understand that, you know, the light's being absorbed by the pigment in the hair. Treatment procedure. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I mean, when I said earlier about unless they're a hairdresser, I just mean in terms of the terminology. I know. Always, explain about how the hair growth cycles work, so that they know that they need top-ups and stuff like that. But I'm sure everyone's probably doing that anyway. So,
treatment procedure explained. I mean, I think you need to bear in mind that for a lot of people, this is really nerve-wracking. You know, they sort of, for us, laser is such an everyday kind of, you know, thing that we're familiar with, but for some people, they really put it up there with surgery or something. You know, it's a big deal, and they will feel anxious, and they're going to be worried about whether it hurts or not, things like that. So how do you deal with that, Kerry? What do you?
Well, it's funny. I sometimes get people like in completely different camps. I mean, a lot of people come in, especially when you're, you know, treating their face, will be quite sort of, you know, a little bit anxious, and so, you know, it's nice to be able to reassure them. I had a guy come in once, and he'd never had laser before, and he literally said, right, can you whack it right up, because, you know, I want to get really, really quick results. And I was literally about to point a laser at his face, and you think, he's very brave. So people, and then you get everything in between. So quite often people have had treatment elsewhere, they've moved area or whatever. But yeah, I think it's really important I often will get up from the desk, walk around to the laser, show them the handpiece, show them the block, say, look, this is what you're going to feel on your skin. And if I don't do it then, I do it just before. And because obviously when you are treating the face, they've got, you know, occlusive eye shields and they can't see what's going on. So I'll often say, right, you're going to hear the cryo come on now, you know, you'll hear the laser booting up. So I literally just, you know me, Sam, I talk for England. So I just talk them through the whole thing so that they know what's going on, even when they've got the eye goggles on. And then, of course, right, I'm going to do the first shot now. So yeah, I always show them right from the beginning what to expect.
I think that explaining what's going on whilst they're lying there, I think that's really key. I'll always remember someone saying to me once, I was doing a facial treatment, getting a really good burnt hair smell, which we all know means that, you know, we've got really good endpoints, it's going to be a great treatment. And she said, what's that smell? And you could see this panic. And she said, it's my flesh burning, isn't it? I was like, my goodness, no, you know, that's a sign that you know, that's your hair, and that's a sign that you're going to get a really good response here. So now, whenever I smell that, I'll say to people, can you smell that? You know, that's an indication that it's working really well.
And I'd almost prefer the people who slightly, you know, err on the side of caution, rather than the gun-ho kind of type who just go, just whack it up, and you know, so yeah.
Side effects, obviously we have to discuss them in the consultation. We'll come back to that in a little while. And consent will, you know, again, really, really important part of the whole consultation procedure. You do not fire a laser at anyone, including your best friend, maybe especially your best friend, without making sure that you've got a signed consent form. And then generally a consultation will be followed by a test patch and photographs as well, obviously. I mean, we'll talk about virtual consultations later on, because that is something that perhaps more of us will have to do. So to minimise the sort of face-to-face time that we're spending with people. But of course, people are always going to have to come in and have that test patch before we go ahead with it. Yeah. So consent, I guess it's worth pointing out there's a big difference between consent and informed consent. I spoke to a chap once who had a non-Lynton system, and he had blistered someone quite badly doing some tattoo removal, And I spoke to him about consent. I said, well, did you talk about, you know, these potential risks? He said, yeah, we discussed all that. And I said, you know, well, you know, if you've got that signed and you, oh, no, I haven't got anything signed. And I said, well, how do you know he gave consent then? He said, well, he was sitting on my treatment bed, you know, so of course he consented to treatment. So that's completely different to demonstrating informed consent, you know, where you've discussed the potential risks and, you know, and they've understood that and they've had the opportunity to ask questions.
And also, you know, when I hear about clinics doing treatments without patch testing, because part of the coming for the consultation and the going away and then choosing to come back again is actually part of the informed consent. You know, you've laid it out for them, they've had time to think about it. It's almost like a cooling off period, but they're actually actively coming back of their own accord. So that is actually quite an important part of informed consent. And obviously some treatments you can't, you know, if you're treating, you know, a tattoo that's like, you know, half a, you know, a centimetre, then obviously by the time you've done it, that doubles up as a patch test. But it's really important. I hear quite a lot locally that, you know, people treat without patch testing, and it's just a disaster waiting to happen.
Yes.
So
I would say if what you're treating is smaller than the area that you would normally patch test, you know, so for a patch test we might be doing 3-4 shots, whatever. You know, if someone is coming to you because they've got a little spider nevus on their cheek, well, there's no point in patch testing elsewhere, is there? You just go ahead and do the treatment.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So of course, in the consent, we explain the benefits and the risks of treatment. We indicate that a course of treatments will be required and that maintenance will be necessary. So it's not all about how, you know, how this treatment's going to be fantastic and it's going to, like, you know, change your life and give you everything that you want. We have to talk about the fact that for some people, for hair removal, you might be coming in and having top-up treatments a couple of times a year, but, you know, indefinitely in some cases. And some people don't respond satisfactorily to treatment at all. You know, thankfully, it's few and far between. But some studies say that 5 to 10% of the population do not respond to laser or light-assisted hair removal. Now, I don't think it's anywhere near that. You know, I think if 1 in 10 people were not getting the, you know, those sorts of results, and, you know, we'd have a lot of disgruntled customers. But it's definitely true that some people will be slower or they'll get more regrowth, and it's really important that you discuss that in the consultation, because it will save a lot of headaches, you know, later on down the road.
I remember as part of the first level 4 I did back in 2005, and we were told then that 5% of people did not respond to treatment. This was for hair though, and I do actually include that as part of my consultation. I always say, look, for reasons unknown, these are not people who are unsuitable, these are people who are actually suitable for treatment. There is a statistic that exists that says that 5% of people will not respond, and then I say, look, I've never experienced that here, this is not a statistic at my clinic.
You're not seeing 1 in 20 people not responding.
Absolutely, but that is a statistic that exists, and therefore I feel that it's important that you know. So yeah, don't be the first.
So yeah, side effects. I like the way when we were talking about this the other day, you had a nice way of talking about the sort of reactions, skin reactions, and you divide them into these 3 categories, don't you?
Yeah. So I probably, it's not that I lay it on thick, but I really do not gloss over side effects. And I say to them very openly, look, you know, I am not expecting anything to go wrong, but obviously we're dealing with laser. So I say I always put possible side effects or skin reactions into 3 categories, and that is normal and expected, possible but unwanted, and an adverse reaction. And I always start with the worst one first. I'll say, you know, an adverse reaction is a major full-on laser burn, and I am not expecting to see that. And then I take the opportunity to reiterate the stuff about the sun. I'll say, if you had been on a sunbed and forgotten to tell me, had been, you know, taking, I don't know, a medication that you'd forgotten to declare, because this is obviously towards the end of the consultation that you're doing this, then you could get a severe burn. And then that way, if they haven't completely told you everything, or if they've genuinely forgotten, that will jog their memories. I say, you know, but I'm not expecting that to happen. I said, all I am expecting to see is, and then I'll mention those, like, you know, reddening of the skin, slight swelling, you know, heat in the area, etc. And then the one I really focus on is the possible but unwanted. And in that category, I list the, you know, all the ones on the consent form, like, you know, mild burning, blistering, bruising, pigment changes in the skin, whether it's hyper or hypo. And then obviously I explain about that. And then I tend to also focus in on their actual treatment. So, for example, I will say, you know, if you are having a red tattoo, for example, then blistering is far more likely. But for hair removal, I would not expect you to blister. But I cannot tell you 100% that you will never get any of these reactions, even though they're not likely for your treatment at all. And then I'll say to them, I've never had that reaction from anyone, and I've been doing this for, you know, however many years. But it's important that they fully understand what could go wrong, because if they do so much as get a tiny blister, then they know what to do about it. You've told them about it, you've reassured them. And then I always say, you know, even our tattoo clients who do get some blistering, it's nature's elastoplast, don't pick it, don't put Auntie Flo's magic potion for blisters on it, just leave it. And so it gives you an opportunity to both reiterate, you know, what you've been through, but also other treatments you do as well. So, you know, it's a way of also letting them know what else you do in clinic. But yeah, I always put them into 3 categories. I go to the worst one first, then what I'm expecting to see, then I talk about the possible but unwanted, and then I come full circle and just reiterate that all I'm expecting to. You might get a bit of swelling in the area, you might get a bit of swelling around the follicle, but you may not get that at all. You know, some people go very red, some people don't. Some people get perifollicular edema, or, as I explained to the client, swelling around the follicle. You may not get that. So you lay it out. You absolutely do not gloss over it. You don't, you know, make out like it's not a big deal, but you don't frighten them either. So they go away fully understanding what could happen.
So what about using the consultation as an opportunity to upsell or cross-sell? You mentioned talking about other treatments that you do in your clinic. How do you go about it?
So I hate being sold to. So I don't go all out to sell. I don't feel that the consultation isn't necessarily for that. The very first point of contact, if I went somewhere and I just went in for one thing and they just sat talking to me ages about something else, I'd completely be turned off by that. So, but other times, you know, people come in and say, right, what can you do for my skin? I'm really fed up with this, and I really want, what is that? And then you say, right, these are your options. But generally, I would establish in the consultation, just, you know, gain that person's trust. You need to bond with them. I also have a way of just letting them know about everything that I do without seeming like it's selling, so that
for example,
they know.
If you were talking about swelling, you know, but in the adverse reactions, if they're having hair removal, you say, well, you can get some swelling, but that tends to be when we're doing treatments like red vein treatments on the cheeks, and then they know, don't they, that that's something else that you offer.
Yeah. Exactly. I met a client once who was really annoyed because she came to me for hair removal, and she said that the other place where she'd been to had said, right, well, when we finish with your hair, we'll start on your veins. And she was really upset about this. So she said, you know, but, you know, there are ways of saying, I mean, I had a lady in who had the most amazing veins. I was just itching to, you know, be able to zap them. But as I say, I just filter that in, and as it happened, she didn't pick up on it, as in she obviously wasn't interested, and that's fine. But if you've planted the seed in a very non-selling kind of way, then, you know, if they're interested, they'll come back to you. So I don't think it's important that they go ahead with lots of different things. I mean, I always try, obviously, sell a sun cream when they're coming in, especially for the face, because that goes hand in hand. But that will come later, you know. You know, the initial, what you're sowing, and then it's like a garden, you know, if you water your seeds and you look after it, and, you know, it will grow. So
do you actively monitor your conversion rates from consultation? I think in smaller clinics, a lot of the time they don't. I do think, though, if you've got very big clinics and you've got lots of different people doing consultations, it's really worth just looking at what percentage don't go on to have treatment and trying to investigate that.
I mean, it is going to, basically, we don't ever get clients who don't convert, and we can be treating about 20 people a day, sometimes a bit less, sometimes more, and we never get clients who don't convert. It's very rare, and those files we literally put aside, and then we look at it and say, why didn't they convert? You know, sometimes there'll be literally people who are just not, they were never coming, I don't know why they were coming in the first place, kind of thing. So they were never going to have laser treatment. So I don't actually keep track of it in terms of like a spreadsheet and things like that, because we don't really get any people who don't convert. So, but I think, yeah, in a big clinic, especially like London or something, I think maybe, yeah, it would be really helpful.
Test patching then. So, as we talked about, everyone clearly has to have a test patch before they have a treatment, unless their treatment is fewer shots than a test patch would be, if that makes sense. So we treat a small area of the skin in the area that you're going to treat, or as near to as you can. So there's no point in, you know, if you're going to be treating someone's face, don't test patch on the back of the neck, because, you know, it's got different levels of sun exposure, it's got different levels of target, it's not really giving you any useful information, that. And if people are having treatments in multiple areas of the body, you have to test patch them as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Start with the suggested parameters then, and then increase you know, the fluence according to the skin reaction, according to the pain score, all of those things, you know. So for vessels, it's easy. You increase it until you see the reaction that you want in the vessels. For hair, sometimes it can be, you know, it's not always as obvious, is it? You don't always get perifollicular edema, for example. You don't always get erythema. So just go with your sort of, you know, try to straddle your sort of best guess on what fluents will work well for them. We generally say,
and I always
go on, sorry.
I always say, you know, it doesn't matter if you waste a few shots because you started low. You know, just, you know, it's better to do that than go in, you know, too high. So, and also you should be repatch testing all the time. So not at every treatment, but, you know, if you're doing a treatment on someone's legs and they're saying to you, you know, it's a good sort of 7 out of 10, then you probably don't need to repatch test. But if they're saying it's about 6 or 7, you're thinking, well, actually, by the time the next appointment comes around, the hair will have reduced. And if you keep the parameters the same, you're not going to get, you know, a decent amount of heat in the skin. Then you would repatch test. So I tend to assess it at each one, and then do a few shots slightly higher, record it, always record it that it is a patch test though for your next treatment. And then the next time they come in, they'll be able to, because years ago I had a girl who worked for me and she didn't repatch test, and someone came in for full leg bikini and we had them booked out, you know, for an hour and a half, and we couldn't treat them because it was just ineffective. They were saying, oh, it's about a 4 or 5 out of 10. So we had to then patch this and send them away and bring them back. So, but you know, you learn, don't you? So
we've got a comment here from Lauren, one of our trainers. Hi, Lauren. And she said it's also good to repatch test if you haven't seen the client for an extended period of time. That's really key, I think, especially throughout the summer months. If you've patch tested someone in January, don't just think that in June it's absolutely fine to go ahead and treat them on the same settings. And that's particularly key, I guess, given, you know, the current circumstances where with lots of people, we've had lovely weather, you know, so.
Yeah, and don't forget as well, guys, that you have to patch test. If someone hasn't been into you for 6 months, you need to repatch test, and because that is part of your medical protocols, your insurance will be based on that. So if someone does come in January and then they come back in August and you haven't repatch tested them, I don't think you'd be covered by insurance if something went wrong. I don't know. I'm assuming that's
I think
that's
about
right.
I would say 6 months is a. Yeah, I mean, it
6
can
months.
be it can be tricky for things like tattoo removal, for example, towards the end of the treatment. I guess even sometimes with hair removal, you might only be doing a treatment every 4 months or so, maybe.
No.
So, you know, but just consider, I guess, the time of the year, things like that as well.
And even if you are within the 6 months, if anything's changed on their medical forms, or you just think, well, they don't look tanned, but I'm sure they looked a little bit whiter, just I would patch test again. I know it takes up clinic time, etc., but it's so worth it. It's so worth doing things correctly, because the consequences are just not worth it. So
what about photographs? Do you photograph everyone that comes in, or?
Every single client who comes through the door. I won't even patch test without a photograph. And if someone doesn't want to have a photograph taken, I won't treat them. And the reason for that is because, and don't get me wrong, you know, sometimes women are like, oh my God, I don't want my extended bikini. But there are ways that you can, you know, we get a paper towel. We literally are just, you know, they've got their pants on still. You can take a photo of just the skin, especially the labia, so the lip area. It's important to see the density of hair and the colour of skin. But I don't do it because if, you know, it's two things, three things actually. One, you need to know as a practitioner that this is actually an effective treatment, because you're not going to remember exactly how dense people's hair was. And if they come in and say, oh, I don't think it's working, etc. Secondly, it's for them to reassure them, because very occasionally I will get someone in who says, oh, you know, it was going, but I think it's, you know, I think the hair's coming back. And I say, okay, well, that's fine. Let's get your photos out. And, you know, at that point I'm thinking, well, I can't remember exactly. And then they see the photos and they're like, oh yeah, no, that's a massive difference. So yeah, so I would always photograph. And the other reason is because if anything was on the skin, you won't know. So I had a guy who came in years ago and he had a patch test under his chin. And he phoned me up 3 days later and he said, oh, I've got a white scar under my chin. And I thought, that's weird. I mean, you wouldn't get a hypopigmented scar unless you burnt. And I said, have you burnt or blistered? No, nothing. It was all fine. But I've definitely got this white scar. So I brought him in, looked at his photos, and he had an old shaving cut scar, which he'd obviously never looked at, because, you know, you don't look at underneath your chin. And he wasn't trying to pull a fast one or anything. He was genuinely, I've got this white mark. But because I was able to show him the photo before I'd even patch tested him, it was all, you know, fine. So yeah, I would definitely encourage that 100%.
I think this picture is a really good example. This was, we were doing a clinical trial at a hospital, and they had an electrolysis service there. So we were, you know, demonstrating the speed at which and they could get through. I mean, they had patients who'd been coming to them for years for this electrolysis.
Yeah.
It was complete, you know, it wasn't cost effective to offer it at all. And this lady, I don't know if you can see from her hair, but she's sort of auburn, sort of reddish hair, and she responded least well of everyone in the trial. And you can see, I mean, 5 electrolysis treatments on hair like this is not going to really touch it, and we know that. But she came in, she said, well, neither side has worked, neither treatment's worked. I'm still shaving every single day. But we were able to look at this picture, and I think you can see on the right-hand side that it's definitely patchier, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, it's been slow to clear, but there's definite improvement. Now, it's not often, obviously, that you're going to have that sort of split face to be able to do that. But if you've got a good before photograph, then, you know, it can be really valuable, I think.
No, definitely. And it's for your own reassurance.
Yeah,
it can be hard to get
consistent photographs though, can't it? You know, with the differences in light and distance and things like that. So I think have a little photo station, or, you know, always do your photographs in the same position if you can. And
yeah, always. There's nothing more annoying when you see before and after photos in magazines, and one's got makeup on and one's smiling and one's a different light. I'm thinking that is not a good before and after photo. It needs to be in the same light. So
I think it's also really useful to be able to show people sort of what they can expect after treatment. So, you know, people have to be aware that if they're having pigment treated, for example, it's going to look worse before it gets better, you know, and that's demonstrated really well by just showing them photographs, isn't it? And this is a good example. You know, it's about showing people realistic results. Now, this woman was actually very happy with the results of her tattoo removal treatment, but, you know, there's potentially a little bit of hypopigmentation there. There's still a bit of pigment remaining. Now, give that another year or two, and it's probably going to really settle down. But people need to see not just the very best results that they could possibly get, but also, you know, realistic. A little bit of ink remaining, for example, is not uncommon with tattoo removal. Some, you know, here's some hyperpigmentation that it did resolve, but you've got to make sure that people are going to be, if you know, if they're left with that, are they going to be okay? Because that potentially can happen. So
yeah, that's why it's really important to not gloss over the side effects. I never get any clients who are unhappy, and that's not because I can do everything, you know, 100% amazingly all the time. It's because I'm brutally honest about, you know, what is achievable and what, you know, can go wrong. So, and if you do that, then you hopefully, you know, you won't tend to get, you know, complaints or unhappy clients or anything. So
we've got a question here from someone, Kerry, saying that does the discomfort of the patch test need to be a 6 or 7, even if you have other endpoints? And I would say, well, one, it depends on what you're treating, I guess, and what system you're using. But if you're doing a vascular treatment and the vessel's gone, and they said I hardly felt that, then of course that's absolutely fine, you know. So
exactly,
it's just another indicator, isn't it?
Yeah. And everyone's got different, I mean, I'm a wimp, like there is no one wimpier than me. So, you know, and because I'm a wimp, because I'm a wimp, I kind of, you know, I know a wimp when I see one as well. So, so, you know, sometimes, you know, with more experience, when you're looking at a hair, the thickness of the hair, the color of the hair, and you're looking at the fluence you're using, and they're saying, oh my God, that's you know, that's really hot. And I'm thinking, that can't be that hot because I'm using such a low fluence. And then the next one, they'll say, oh yeah, no, that's fine. And you've used the same, you know, fluence. So it's about getting to know your client as well, and their skin. But yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, where's my screen gone?
Cool. What's happening?
Let me share again. Oh, this is quite interesting. I can remember speaking to someone once who used a pulse dye laser. Now, I'm guessing lots of people here are not pulse dye laser users, but she said, yeah, people are always, I always tell them that they're going to be bruised after treatment. For those of you that are not familiar with pulse dye lasers, this purpura, this bruising is not an adverse reaction. That's a very common endpoint of treatment. And she said, I always tell them they're going to be bruised, but they're still surprised by it. Well, you know, show them these sorts of photographs. That obviously that's an easy way of solving that issue.
And this was, do you remember when I was at St Thomas's Hospital with you in 2006, the lady that was being treated there, she'd only had a pulse dye beforehand, and she was expecting this horrendous sort of bruising, and she was like, oh my God, this is amazing. so yeah, because she was expecting to come out with what she called war wounds. So
I think it's probably worth mentioning how consultations are going to change in light of you know, COVID-19. I think more and more, where possible, we want to minimise the time that we're spending with someone in a face-to-face situation. You know, so where we can do video consultations, I think absolutely that should be done. Even when I know we've talked about doing video consultations during lockdown, but I think even going forward, it's probably something that a lot of clinics are going to start to introduce. So, I mean, everyone watching this webinar, I guess, is familiar with Zoom, because that's what we're running this on. And the nice thing about Zoom, of course, is that you can share your PowerPoint. So if you've got any slides, before and after photographs, that sort of thing, it's very easy to do that with Zoom. There's another one called Teams, which you may or not be familiar with. Teams, I think, is more secure than Zoom. So I think there have been cases of what they call Zoom bombing, where people just sort of come in on your meetings and, you know.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah, I think quite a few colleges and universities have had this issue. So Teams, I believe, is a bit more secure. Of course, there's other, you know, there's things like WhatsApp and FaceTime and things like that, perhaps slightly less professional maybe. But I guess if you're using something like Zoom, just bear in mind that if it's going to be more than 40 minutes, you need a professional Zoom license. I think it's something like £10 a month. It's not huge amounts of money.
And I think I read somewhere that Teams is what was Skype or
That's
something?
right. Yeah, it's Microsoft.
I didn't actually know that.
Some clinic software packages have got this already built in. So for those of you that use Belba, is that how you say it? Then I think that already has video call in it. And certainly we use, at our clinic, we use Avatu, and that's got a Zoom integration with it as well. So another thing that we should probably be considering, well, certainly if we're doing virtual consultations, then we need to get consent, and we need to do that electronically, I guess. So there are things like DocuSign, which you can use, or there's Adobe Sign. So you can send, and most insurance companies will recognise that as being secure and good enough as well. I would definitely suggest that any pre and post treatment advice that we're giving to people is sent electronically now, rather than, you know, handing them paper.
Yeah, I mean, I actually get them to sign now. There are 2 pages, and they sign to say they've received a copy, because I have had people say to me, "Oh, I don't remember getting pre and post advice." And it's like, nobody leaves the clinic without it. So now I get them to sign. But actually, I mean, I've actually been doing some work with Richard Crawford Small, who's been doing some of the webinars with you and doing Launchpad and things like that. So, and I know that, you know, from the work I've been doing with him, that I definitely want to become more digital. And it's just better for the environment as well, you know.
And the space, I mean, the storage space that we all need in our clinics to store all the files.
So but yeah, obviously it needs to be, you know, there are various different things out there, and so I haven't really looked into it, but it needs to be efficient. You know, whatever you're going to do is because it's going to be making your life a lot easier, and also that it's, you know, it's more compliant as well because of the way you're storing the data. You know, you're not having to store in a fireproof locked cabinet and, you know, for X many years, all that kind of stuff. But it's just going to improve the whole process. It's also a way of being able to improve the client interaction as well. I mean, I haven't really looked into it that much yet, but there are different things out there. And apparently by 2021, we should all be more digital. Because obviously, because I've been doing it for a while, I'm definitely more old school, but I am going to be looking at something like iConsult or something along those lines. So
yeah, us too at the Lynton clinic. I mean, we're still, it's a learning curve for all of us, I think, at the moment, but we'll get there. Other considerations. I mean, this for any of you that are interested in this, there's a webinar next Tuesday where we're going to talk about reopening and how we as businesses should try to, what things we're going to have to do to accommodate clients coming in who are potentially infectious. So, but during the consultation is the point to flag that, you know, you do not come in if you're feeling unwell. Don't bring anyone else with you. Don't bring a load of handbags and, you know, stuff like that. That's not necessary. We're going to ask, we're lucky that we've got a big car park outside the clinic. We're going to ask people to stay in their cars until we're ready for them to come in. We don't want people really waiting in the waiting rooms. And obviously there'll be enough time in between clients so that there's no crossover as well.
Yeah.
And then clearly, you know, hand sanitizing, PPE, things like that.
Yeah.
Perhaps if we move on to contraindications. So I mentioned before that perhaps the number one reason why we would turn someone away for treatment is because they're currently tanned, or they've recently been on a sunbed, or, you know, they've used fake tan or whatever. And it is, you know, we very rarely have anyone calling us with any issues during the winter months. But, you know, during the summer months, that's when people will start running into problems sometimes. So we don't treat suntan skin, and we have to make that, again, you make that really clear in the consultation. There's nothing worse than, you know, booking out an hour for a treatment and then someone comes in and they've just, you know, they're completely tanned, or they just put some fake tan on, you know, 2 days before or whatever it is. So.
And that's why actually the initial contact over the phone is really important, because I always check then if they're actually tanned, if they've applied fake tan, because in the early days people would turn up and they say, oh, you know, I'd have put them in, and I could have mentioned it there and then, but I didn't. And then they turn up and they, oh, I didn't realise I put on fake tan last night. Oh,
yeah. Pigmentation disorders then, so that's, I guess, another common one. So melasma, you know, this hormonal pigmentation that's very common, usually in women, but occasionally in men as well. The issue with that, we know, I think most of us know that it's very difficult to treat melasma. But even if they're having another treatment, something like hair removal, and they're prone to melasma, that would generally contraindicate. With cancer, we try to treat people who are in good health overall, you know. So if they currently have cancer, we wouldn't treat them. If they've had cancer in the past, then, you know, if they've had the 5-year all clear, absolutely fine. But it never hurts to, our fallback position with all of this is always, you know, if they can get the okay from their GP or their specialist consultant, you know, at least it shows that you've done your due diligence, really. Keloid scarring. So keloid scars, these are these scars that extend outside the boundaries of the original wound. It's not going to make you more likely to have an adverse reaction if you're prone to keloid scarring, but if you were to have an adverse reaction, you know, it's very, very rare, thankfully, that you would be left with any scarring following a laser or IPL burn. But if you're prone to keloid scarring, then potentially that could happen. So that would generally contraindicate you to treatment as well. Epilepsy. So sometimes people think that the flashing lights might trigger fits, but actually it doesn't flash at the right frequency to trigger a seizure, but perhaps the stress of the situation, you know, sort of if they're lying on a bed. The question is, if someone starts to have a seizure whilst they're lying on your treatment bed, do you know how to deal with that? And if you do, then great. If you don't, then, you know.
So, yeah.
I think you can drive a car if you haven't had a seizure for 12 months. I mean, I think if you can drive a car, you can come and have an IPL or laser treatment. That should be fine. You know,
yeah, that's what I do in my clinic. If they're able to drive a car for the last year, then they can have a treatment. So,
pregnancy. So again, most people will be aware that we don't treat pregnant women. But, you know, if someone comes into you and says, oh my God, I just found out that when I had my last treatment that I was pregnant, you can absolutely reassure them that there's no risk to them as a mother or the fetus or as an operator, you know, as long as you're sort of making yourself comfortable. That, I mean, that's the, I guess, the biggest danger, I guess, that you, as a pregnant operator.
I actually cover that in the consultation, Sam. I actually say that to them. I say that, you know, we cannot treat you if you're pregnant. But if you ever find out that you are pregnant and you think, oh my God, I had a treatment last week, you know, the light stops at the end of the, you know, it is not dangerous, etc. So that they're not, you know, freaking out about it. So, and although obviously, I mean, when I was pregnant, I was lasering bits and pieces, but obviously what you do with yourself is not what you do with clients. But the reason we don't do it as well is because if someone was to lose a baby, you know, medico-legally speaking, it's a very difficult area because you can't prove that you didn't cause it. They can't prove you did, and it's just a nightmare. So
I don't want
you know,
to be in that position where someone's coming to you and saying, you know, was it this? What, you know, was it the laser treatment that did this? Just
absolutely, yeah. And you're not insured anyway. So
you're not insured. There's an increased risk of, you know, so there's the line, that the pigmented line that people develop on their tummies, melasma, things like that. All of our freckles and moles will get darker during pregnancy. There is an increased risk of pigmentation, and of course hormone fluctuations are going to affect your hair growth, you know, vascular system, everything. But there was a case a couple of years ago now. There was lots of discussion about this at the last British Medical Laser Association meeting, because there was a case where a clinic refused to treat a guy who was HIV positive, and he took them to court and he actually won. He said that they discriminated against him. Now, I think their argument was that that they didn't want to treat him because of the medications that he was on and whatever, but being HIV positive is a protected, has protected status under the Equalities Act. As
Sam, do you know what treatment he was having?
No, I don't. It was a laser treatment. I think it was hair removal, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Because obviously there are certain treatments that we would and wouldn't do in my clinic with HIV, and it all comes down to the plume. And spatter and things like that. So I wouldn't do tattoo, for example. I
guess the argument though is if your viral load is undetectable, which it is generally with the anti, you know, viral sort of packages that people are on, then the risk of cross infection is minimal, you know. So
absolutely.
yeah.
I remember years ago, a girl who worked for me, we had an HIV client come in, and she was genuinely really scared about, you know, treating. And luckily, a good friend of mine is an STD nurse, and he came in and did a whole talk on Hep B and Hep C and HIV and all sorts. And he was explaining just that if they are, you know, sometimes people will come in, they might have it, they don't even know. So you may well have treated someone who has HIV anyway. So that's why your decontamination infection control procedure should always be as if, you know, like we are going to have to now, pretending someone actually does have COVID. You need to assume that everyone has everything and that you're protecting yourself. But sorry, did you say it's got protected status like pregnancy does?
Yeah, it does. It does. So there was discussion at the BMLA about whether we could treat pregnant women, with lots of people saying, look, you know, we know that this is not going to do any harm.
Yeah.
But lots of other people saying, but we don't have proof that it's absolutely safe because we haven't done the clinical trials on hundreds of pregnant women, you know. And
who's the volunteer for that?
Yeah, well, and the general consensus was that this is an elective procedure. It's not a life or death situation. It's only for a short amount of time. You know, they're not going to be pregnant forever. You might be HIV positive forever, obviously, but you're not going to be pregnant forever. So just wait. And so generally, you know, the BMLA, although there were a few people saying, yes, this is, you know, it's fine to do, the general consensus was, you know, just leave it.
Exactly. Someone's just said, could we discuss diabetes?
I think it might be on the next, it will be on the slide after. Yes, we will.
And also Heidi said she thought that if they are on meds, we have to treat. So again, I would say it depends what you're doing. I mean, I think you do a lot of tattoo, don't you, Heidi? Yeah, as if they're on, if they have HIV, if they're on meds. I don't do any tattoo removal if someone is either Hep C or HIV or even Hep B. I wouldn't do tattoo removal.
We would on someone who's on medication, because again, you know, you don't know that you're not doing that anyway. Your general sort of infection control procedures should protect you, I guess. But again, we would be asking them to go and get a letter from their consultant.
Yeah, so what Kevin, my friend, said is I think they have regular tests to check their viral loads as well, and obviously tweak their meds and things. So yeah, if someone had a really low viral, that's absolutely fine. But if someone had just been detected and they just started meds and things, I would wait.
Yeah. There are some conditions that make you sensitive to light, so things like porphyria, lupus. Again, it's generally to ultraviolet light, it's generally to shorter wavelengths. Nonetheless, we would generally contraindicate those. Communicable diseases we've touched on, so you know, just keep in mind hepatitis and HIV in particular. Immune and lymph systems disorders, they would generally be contraindicated, especially for things like tattoo removal, where we're relying on a healthy lymph system to remove the pigment. So things that are not contraindications but we need to be aware of: hormonal imbalances. So you know, one in 4 women have got polycystic ovaries, so you're going to be treating people with PCOS, I'm sure. Thyroid conditions are very common, so we just have to emphasize the fact that we're not treating the cause of the hair growth if it's hair removal. You know, we're not treating the underlying condition, so they may need to have more maintenance treatments. Cold sores, I'd never treat anyone with an active cold sore, but they can be triggered by light, they can be triggered by any sort of skin trauma, so just, you know, mention that to people who are prone to it. They might want to go and get some acyclovir prior to treatment. Tattoos in the area. This is a guy that came in to see us for hair removal treatment. So he could have had it all on the rest of his back, but he would have been left with a hairy patch over his tattoo. So you have to do, you know, you have to stay at least a centimetre away from any tattoo. We don't treat it over inflamed skin, although potentially sometimes, you know, there's some evidence to suggest that vascular systems can help to treat psoriasis, and diabetes, someone mentioned earlier. I think so. Sometimes I've heard people say, well, if it's type 2, we'll treat. If it's type 1, we won't. It's not really to do with whether it's type 1 or type 2. It's to do with how well your blood sugar levels are controlled. And you know, there are people who take daily insulin. They've got type 1 diabetes, but their blood sugar is very well controlled. And also, it depends on what treatment you're doing. I would not be doing tattoo removal on somebody's foot if they had diabetes. But you know,
no, or leg pain.
yeah, anything below the knee, really.
Yeah, I don't know if everyone is already using it, but there is an additional separate Lynton consent form specifically for diabetes and diabetic clients. So I always use that for all diabetic clients. And again, for me, it does come down to how well their skin heals. You know, quite often when I say that, you know, the last lady said, oh, well, this is a burn that I did on the oven, you know, last week, and it was completely healing fine. So I had another lady who came in, told me she wasn't diabetic, and then she let it slip during a conversation, like about treatment 7 into doing like her full legs. And she said, oh, I said, you're diabetic? And she said, yes. I said, you didn't tell me. She said, I know, I'm really sorry. I said, I went to another clinic and they wouldn't treat me. So when I came to see you, I said I wasn't. So, God, but yeah, it all comes down to how well their skin heals. And obviously she's had 7 treatments, her skin was fine. So yeah.
We can send out that diabetes form to people. We've got a few people asking about that. Body dysmorphic disorder. I think this is really key to try and pick this up. So it's estimated that between 10 and 40% of people who look for aesthetic treatment have got a degree of dysmorphophobia. So, and the problem with that then is that people who are seeing, you know, the hair on their face or whatever that you can't really see, they're still going to be seeing it probably after a course of 6 treatments. There's a really strong link between people who are dysmorphophobic and people who are not satisfied with treatment. So, I mean, I've got a scenario here. So when I showed this to Kerry, she said, is this about listening? It's true. But actually it was a client I had once who she came in for some training, and she talked about how her facial hair was really impacting on her quality of life, which we hear very often, don't we, you know. But she was saying, I can see people looking at me and I don't like to meet new people, and I'm really self-conscious about it. And she puts her hands over her face when she talks, and all of these things that, you know, quite common for women who have facial hair. So I said to her, okay, well, let's take a look at it. And this was on her top lip, and so couldn't see anything. I said, when did you last remove it? She said, no, I haven't removed it. I've left it so that you can see it. And she said, if you get the mag lamp and you shine the light on it, you can see what I mean. And I thought, you know, if you have to get a magnifying glass and shine a light on it to see this, it really shouldn't be. It was disproportionately affecting her life, you know. And I just knew that, well, one, the treatment wasn't going to work because there wasn't hardly any hair there, and what was there was incredibly fair and fine. And 2, she just, you know, wouldn't have been happy with the results of treatment anyway, I don't think. So what I said was, I just think that your hair is a little bit too fine and a bit too light to give you the results that you're after. And, you know, suggested that she went and spoke to someone who did electrolysis, and they wouldn't be able to do it either, in all honesty. But I wanted to give her another option, you know.
Someone like that, I would just send for threading, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. We were talking about demanding customers. You had a good example, didn't you? Of
which one? The demanding one, or the demanding
one?
Who had body dysmorphia?
So tell us about both. How do you deal with them? How
okay.
do you deal with people who are coming in and telling you what to do? And
so basically, I am very brutally honest with clients. You know, I actually say to them, look, part of what you're planning to pay for is my expertise, and so, you know, you can either take the goodwill advice or not. But what I would say to everyone listening is that, and I know we've got a range of people listening, some people would have been doing this for years, but there is no such thing as the customer's right. Not in your four walls. As a laser clinician, expert, whatever you call yourself, you are the king or queen of laser, not the person sitting in front of you. And that's not to say that the customer's never right. I'm sure, you know, like everyone, we're human, we can get things wrong, but you are the boss when it comes to treatments. Do not, what I say to people who've worked for me before is never, ever feel under pressure to treat someone. And in fact, the people who are putting the pressure on you to treat them, those are the ones that, you know, you need to be really wary of. And I've always said to girls who work for me, I will never, obviously I will question as to what happened, but I will never have an issue with you not converting a consultation and turning someone away, but I will have an issue with you doing a treatment on someone that is not appropriate. Either the treatment isn't appropriate for them or they are just not appropriate to treat. Because these clients, especially the ones who have body dysmorphia, I think I was telling you, Sam, about the woman who came in to see me, and I don't know if any of you guys have seen, I think the lady's called The Bride of Frankenstein or something, and she's called the Catwoman.
Jocelyn Wittgenstein.
And she was gorgeous, and then she just had tons of cosmetic surgery. Anyway, it becomes an addiction, and she obviously had body dysmorphia. But the lady who came in to see me could have been this lady's twin. And one of the first things she said to me when she sat down was, my plastic surgeon's refusing to do any more treatment on me. And I mean, if you've seen how she was presenting, you'd think, well, how can you possibly do any more? Now, if someone says that to you, and obviously they look like that should ring massive alarm bells. She then booked in for another consultation. She was asking me to give her advice on plastic surgery, which obviously I don't do. She then came in a second time, and again wasted an hour of clinic time. And then a year later, I had a new consultation come in, different name, and it was the same woman. And she sat down, she'd actually given a completely different name, and she came in again. And she wanted to have thread veins removed. Now, if someone is sitting in front of you like that and you're thinking, I can't treat this person, but what am I going to say? I will do all the normal things. I won't just sit there immediately and say, well, I'm not able to treat you. So I will get them on the bed. I'll take their makeup off. I'll have a good look at their skin. And what I said to this lady in particular, I said, look, I've looked at your veins and I know that I'm not going to be able to get the results that you'll be happy with. So ethically, I'm not in a position to treat you. It's not right to take your money to give you results that I know you're not going to be happy with. And as soon as I'd said that, she just started something else. But what do you think if I lift skin like this? So anyway, in the end, I sat down, I said, well, actually, this is actually the third time you've been to us. And do you remember how we discussed this and how we discussed that? And I'm not actually qualified to give you advice on plastic surgery. And in the end, she just wouldn't go. So I said, look, I'm not a plastic surgeon. If you would like my personal, not professional, my personal opinion on what you could do for plastic surgery, it's £50 for the hour. She could not have got up quick enough. She literally, as she was talking, she was picking up her bags, and I never saw her again. So, but it took, it was 3 hours of clinic time. And, people like that. And also what I would say to people is, look, we have all not been working for months. We're going to be desperate to get clients back through the door, etc. Don't be tempted to take on clients like this. If they so much as get a tiny blister, they will cause merry hell. And they are just not worth it. They will never be satisfied with the results because they have a completely distorted view of what they look like. And they are the type of people who will leave you a bad review. So it's always important to leave things on a good note with them. But do you want me to cover the difficult one?
Yeah, go on.
Time?
I think everyone likes to know that they're not the only people that get these sorts of clients.
Yeah. So imagine this, it's 2005. I have finally opened after 8 months of being delayed by the Dear Care Quality Commission, who delayed me for 8 months of opening. And my first client walks through the door and she's tanned. So I couldn't treat. And she got in an absolute right huff with me. She was actually quite vile, to be frank. And so I just, I didn't you know, add to the tension, I took a step back and I just took her through. I said, look, you know, you are the first client I've literally just opened today. I'd be absolutely crazy if I was just to turn you away. I don't want to turn you away. I'm doing it because if I put a laser on your skin, you're going to get a burn on your face. And I literally just laid it out like that. And she turned around, she said, yeah, I get it. She said, and at the time I was very dark hair. She said, you're a brunette, I'm a hairdresser. If you asked me to go blonde, I'd say no way. So I do get it. And off she went. 3 weeks later, she came back in. She was tanned again. And she'd just been on a golfing holiday to Portugal. I just thought, oh my God, she's going to go mad. And guess what she did? She went absolutely mad. She was shouting at me. She was, you know, it's completely unacceptable.
Thank God, what have I got myself into?
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so again, I just said, you know, I just went through it again. I said, look, I'm really sorry. You've wasted my time. Do you think I have time to come here? And, you know, I've driven all the way, etc. She just made out like it was the end of the world. And I just laid out again the fact that she was tan. I couldn't treat her. She literally picked up her bag. She stormed out. She slammed the door. Now, back then in the early days, you know, I was gutted. I was so upset. I mean, it's not a nice situation to be in anyway. You know, I hate confrontation. And, you know, it just was really unpleasant. But at the end of the day, you don't want clients like that. And actually, I took the time to write her an A4 page letter afterwards that basically told her in very polite terms that she should find another clinic. And the way I worded it is that I have to follow medical protocols. Those medical protocols say that you can't be tanned. That is what insurance is based on. And at the time, like a lot of people, I was Care Quality Commission registered. And I said, and it's a condition of my registration. So as a result, I'm not able to treat you, but you may like to try this clinic or this clinic. So I listed other clinics that were in the area that she may like to go and visit, which basically told her that I wasn't, in a very polite way, I wasn't willing to treat her. A year later, she tried to book back in. And I phoned her and I said, oh, do you remember you came in a year ago and we decided it probably wasn't a good idea, and I think you were going to book in somewhere else. Oh yes, she said. You know, so you give them the chance to basically save face and leave it on really good terms. And she's like, oh yes, it was a complete mistake. Yes, oh yes, I was booked in somewhere else. She wasn't. But it gives them the opportunity not to feel like they're being silly or anything else. But at the end of the day, it ensures that you don't treat these people because they're not worth it.
Yeah, I like that. Our plastic surgeon at the clinic says something like, I don't have the skills to give you the results that you're after. So the onus is on him. You know, it's my fault that I can't do this.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, this is another one. I mean, we so often get photographs of this sort of thing where it looks like, well, there is sun damage, you know, and there's some lentiginous, but there's this underlying melasma. I mean, she definitely has melasma, and it's hard, isn't it, when you get people and they'll say, well, you know, it says all over your website that you can treat pigmentation, or we'll get people who clearly have melasma. And they'll say, well, my doctor says it's sun damage. Well, it is a form of sun damage, you know, but it's not the sort of sun damage that we can treat. We can't, yeah. I mean, you know yourself, don't you, Kerry, because you suffer from it.
I know, because I mean, I've had melasma for 15 years, but you can't really see it because I basically live my life like a day release vampire and kind of lurk in the shadows with massive hats, and you know, but if I go out in 10 minutes it comes back. But the good thing is, and if any of you out there have it yourselves or know anyone who has it, you know, you can say you've had experience of it, and this is the thing, if you become an expert not just at delivering the treatment but the actual conditions that people are coming in for, then that will give them confidence that, you know, you are saying the truth. Because I know with my skin, obviously, you know, I do have a combination of a bit of sun damage from my early years and, you know, melasma, etc. So there's never going to be just one thing, but I wouldn't touch it with a barge pole.
And explain why, you know, if we do it, we could make this worse. It could be much worse, you know. So this is an interesting one. This is one of our customers who's a nurse who this guy came into the clinic said that I've been to my GP. My GP said that I could have it lasered, and she sent it to me and said, what do you think? And I went, oh, you know, it's all of those the ABCs of you know, detecting melanoma. So asymmetric, the borders are irregular, the color is variable, it's quite big, the diameter. I said I wouldn't treat that, even though the GP had said that it was fine to do. You know, I couldn't say to you that is definitely a whatever. So if you do not know that that is definitely a lentigine, let's say, a lentigo, then you know, you should not be treating it. Funnily enough, she showed it to one of her colleagues, another colleague who's a GP, and he said, that's a malignant melanoma, and he's a dead man walking. Those were his exact words. So she sent him back to his GP and asked for it to be biopsied. Went to a dermatologist. The dermatologist wasn't sure what it was. It was biopsied, and it was some sort of papilloma. It was fine, actually. It wasn't a malignant melanoma. But you know, so we talk about all the time, don't we, about, you know, get GP consent. Even if you have GP consent, if you're not happy, if it's outside your comfort zone, then you don't treat it.
Yeah, don't treat. No.
All right, we'll finish off quickly. We've overrun, so we'll finish off quickly by talking about medications. Again, we get asked about medications so often, and understandably, because so many of them are photosensitizing, but it's very, very rare that you get photosensitivity to wavelengths above 500 nanometers. And the shortest wavelength that we really use for any of our treatments is 532 for tattoo removal treatment. So for all of the hair removal treatments, you know, 600, 700, 800 nanometers. So we don't have to worry about photosensitivity. So a few years ago, well, quite a few, 10, 11 years ago, the BMLA released some guidelines on this, and they said that if someone is taking a photosensitizing medication, and you can find that out by, I mean, there are loads of websites. I use the BNF, the British National Formulary. You know, in fact, if you go into a chemist and ask them if they have any BNF, they've probably got some old ones, old books lying around, but the website's really good. And it basically lists every single side effect associated with every drug that's available in the UK. If photosensitivity is listed, do a test patch, and then wait a week if it's hair removal or tattoo, wait a month if it's vascular or pigment. Well, I mean, we're test patching everyone anyway, so all right, we have to wait a bit longer for if it's vascular or pigment. But there are some that we should avoid, and they are basically just the ones that are on your Lynton consultation form. So these are the only ones that the British Medical Laser Association say you have to avoid. So that's Roaccutane, topical retinoids, St John's wort, amiodarone, minocycline, and steroids. And anything that's used for photodynamic therapy, you'll probably never come across that. So, you know, and the BMLA came up with this because they asked all of their members, have you ever come across an adverse reaction that you could put down to a drug? And, you know, there were some people that said, well, I got this once and it could possibly have been, but they had no proof that it was that. You know, basically the general consensus was that no, you know, it's not an issue. So it's and
also don't forget that the drug companies, I mean, they have to list, you know, I mean, if you looked at anything in the BNF, you'd never take anything, you know, they list. And sometimes I will say to clients, you know, for amitriptyline is a typical example, that lists possible photosensitivity, but it also lists hallucinations and euphoria and stomach cramps, and they're not getting any of those either. So, you know, and they went on holiday to Ibiza while they were taking it. So, you know, it doesn't mean anything really.
Absolutely. We've got I think that's the end now. We've got a couple of questions though. So someone's asked, what's PDT? PDT is photodynamic therapy. So that is a treatment that's done generally to treat malignant conditions, very often non-melanoma skin cancers, so things like basal cell carcinomas, squamous cell carcinomas, but sometimes other cancerous conditions as well, where they give you a medication that makes you very sensitive to light. They then put you under a light, and the cancerous cells are more sensitive to the medication, so the light can destroy them basically. So it's not really a treatment that's in common use. Monica's asked, what about surgery? Monica, are you asking about in terms of if someone's had surgery and then wants to have treatment? Again, I think it would depend what it was. If it's, you know, some sort of minor surgeries, some lump or bump removed, then, you know, that should be fine. But if it's major surgery, then we would generally say, you know, at least 3 months, but potentially even 6 months, depending on what it is. Melasma, Katie's asked about melasma. Is there anything we can do? She suggested peels. It's the problem with melasma is there is no cure for melasma. So there are things that you can do to keep it under control, to try and manage it. And some people do use peels, but it's always going to come back. And the main thing is just, as you say, Kerry, stay out of the sun. Yeah.
I mean, I have regular peels, and I go under my Dermalux, but I wear sunscreen. And the main thing is sunscreen alone won't sort it. You've got to wear a hat. So yeah, but I used to have it on my top lip. I used to have a splodge. It looked like someone had thrown brown paint on my forehead. That's completely gone because I always have a hat winter and summer. But it is a pain. I think the person who solves melasma would become like a billionaire.
Someone's asked about how long would you leave? Oh, Heidi, hello. How long would you leave before removing radiotherapy tattoos? The tattoo itself, you could remove whenever you wanted, but the fact that they've had radiotherapy will make the skin much more fragile. So I would probably, well, one, you have to wait until they've had the all clear anyway, but I would probably be leaving it 12 months or so if they've had radiotherapy.
Yeah. And also, if they've had radiotherapy, I mean, they might still be under a consultant. So if anyone's still under a consultant, I always get permission anyway to treat, just to say they've got, you know, either the all clear or they're happy for them to have treatment. So,
Katie, you've asked if you could message Kerry. I'm sure you can. If you want to send it to me, I can.
Yeah, sorry, I've literally only just found that box. I was looking at the other box. I was thinking, where are you reading all these questions? I was thinking, what am I missing? Yeah, of course you can, Katie. No problem.
And Heidi said, top melasma tip. Do you know if the blue light in our devices exacerbates it? Oh, I was going to say, I thought you meant in our IPL devices. I was going to reassure you that there's no blue light at all, no UV light. But you're talking about on tablets and phones and stuff. She says that she's changed the settings on her iPad and it's made a huge difference. That's really interesting.
Oh, wow. That is really interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it can't hurt, can it? So.
Well, it's funny, that is interesting, only because obviously my Dermalux machine has a blue light for active acne. And at first, when I first got the device, I wasn't using it on anyone who had pigmentation, but actually they sent out a paper to confirm that it's actually yellow light that causes the problem. And that blue light, there isn't actually any evidence that blue light does exacerbate melasma. So yeah, so I don't know.
Certainly, I mean, UV will be the main culprit. So wavelengths below 400 nanometers. So
yeah, definitely.
So you've asked, is there an up-to-date drugs list for salons? Well, the drugs list, the contraindicated ones, with just those ones that just showed you there, which are on the Lynton consultation forms. So there's only, half a dozen or so of them. But in terms of an up-to-date drugs list for everything that's photosensitizing, there's too many to list. There's literally hundreds and hundreds. So yeah, check your BNF is the best place to check.
Yeah, and you can buy copies online, on Amazon and stuff, actual physical copies if you want to keep that in the clinic as well. So
yeah, the book's quite handy to flip through.
I was just going to say before we finish off is please don't be tempted to treat people who you think might be even a little bit suntan, because we are all going to be reopening in July, and obviously it's very tempting to think, but honestly, just I wouldn't. I really wouldn't. So.
Oh, we've got a few more. I'll just answer these quickly then before we go. Would you treat thread veins on a woman who's had a baby 10 weeks before she's not breastfeeding? Do you have a...
If she's had the baby and she's not breastfeeding?
Yeah.
I think it depends.
Yeah, I think...
What would you say,
I think
Sam?
ideally 3 months, your hormones, if you're not breastfeeding, hormones should have settled down a bit by then. But for thread veins, it's if it's not like with hair that the hair changes that you're going to get are probably going to still be settling down for a considerable amount of time after birth. But I think it would be fine.
I was thinking more about the possible problems with a 585 handpiece in terms of obviously if hormonally, if their hormones have been up and down, if that could bring out pigmentation, but I would, if they'd had no pigmentation issues, I think it's worth just waiting the 3 months for hair anyway. But I don't know, if someone was absolutely desperate, they were going to be moving abroad or whatever, they'd never had any issues with pigmentation, they hadn't had any melasma when they were pregnant, etc. Yeah, I'd patch test and wait a couple of weeks.
And Lauren has mentioned that the BMF is now available as an app as well for your iPhone, so that's quite handy too.
Lauren, do you know if you have to pay for it? Because I'm sure I remember a few years ago when I first looked at it online that you had to go through like almost like a registration procedure, and that it was only open to like medical people at one point. But I don't know if that's still the case. So I just still use my book.
Someone's asked about the consultation forms. They're all on the customer portal, so you can access them all through that as well. Anyway, I think we better wrap it up. We've been going on far longer than our allocated time. So thanks everyone. If you've got any questions, feel free to drop us an email. You can reach me on clinical@lynton.co.uk. So, and I can forward on.
And thank you all as well for all your feedback after the other webinars, and you know, all the messages and things. It's and if there's other stuff that you'd like to hear more about, then yeah, let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Great.
Anyway,
okay.
We've got quite time for one quick question. IPL. Oh, IPL hair removal side of lip seems to be tricky and tends to take longer. I've not come across that actually. It doesn't, not personally, it just seems to take about the same time, I think.
Anyone else on here had issues with that? It could just be that the hair is finer, maybe.
I think she means on the corner of the lips as opposed to maybe the whole lip. I don't know, but no, not really.
Not something I've particularly had.
Anyway,
right.
Well, have a good weekend, everyone.
Yeah. Take care. Bye now.
All right. Take care. Bye.